Purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to sound that.
Yes.
I move that the House suspend the rules and pass House Resolution 771 in support of the State of Israel.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 771. Resolution standing with Israel as it defends itself against the barbaric war launched by Hamas and other terrorists.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCaul, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to extend debate for each side by 10 minutes, and I also ask UC that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to exclude extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, October 7th, Israelis awoke to rockets raining down on them from Gaza, and gunmen broke down their doors and invaded their homes. Hamas terrorists killed babies and toddlers. They killed elderly grandmothers and grandfathers. They killed moms and dads. They killed teenage kids in their homes. No one was spared from their brutality. Following World War II, my father's war, I never believed the world would bear witness to the slaughter of the Jewish people like we have seen at the bloody hands of Hamas. October 7th was the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Additionally, Hamas is holding 220 hostages, including Americans. This is a flyer, mother and son taken hostage by Hamas. Hashtag bring them home now. They're using them as human shields and threatening to execute them. They must all be released unconditionally now. This is one of the darkest moments in the history of the State of Israel. I was in one of the kibbutzes right on the border of Gaza last year, meeting with members of the community. I saw their daycare center. That very same kibbutz was overrun by 70 Hamas terrorists. Many of the residents I met were slaughtered. Most viciously, the babies and the children I visited in the daycare center were slaughtered, shot to death, beheaded, and burned alive. When the press says it didn't happen, they're just wrong. It did. Because I've seen the pictures of the burned babies and the decapitated children and the blood that you see here in the babies' cribs. For God's sakes, what is going on in this world today? In one of the most horrific stories to emerge, a pregnant woman who had her baby cut out in front of her very eyes as they murdered her baby before her and before they shot her in the head. Simply put, Mr. Speaker, they are monsters. At a music festival to celebrate peace, chaos, gunfire, and explosions ripped through the air, piercing hundreds of bodies with bullets and shrapnel. And while the attendees attempted to flee the area, gunmen surrounded them from every direction. In total, 260 attendees assembled in peace to enjoy music were massacred. Among other atrocities we have heard reported include children with their hands bound, shot in the back of the head, execution style. Women who were raped and slaughtered, one of whom was dragged through the streets of Gaza. Families, including babies and young children, were burned alive in their homes in front of their parents. The beheading of Israeli soldiers and parents gunned down as they shielded their children before the onslaught of gunfire. This is sheer terror. It's evil, and it cannot stand in this world. We are witnessing in real time Hamas carrying out their covenant, that outlines their goal of eradicating Israel through jihad. In fact, their covenant states, quote, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. As they specifically discuss jihad, noting, quote, the day the enemies usurp part of Muslim land, jihad becomes the individual duty of every Muslim in the face of the Jews' usurpation. It is compulsory that the banner of jihad be raised. And Mr. Speaker, it was indeed raised on October 7th. To be completely clear, despite repeated efforts by Israel to secure peace, the Hamas covenant states, quote, peace initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistant movement. There is no solution by the Palestinian problem except by jihad. This declaration calling on the annihilation of the Jewish state must be confronted with zero equivocation. And that is why I worked with my good friend, Ranking Member Meeks, to introduce this bipartisan resolution. It condemns in the strongest possible terms the atrocities of Hamas and reiterates Israel's right to defend herself, along with America's unwavering support for the state of Israel. All roads lead to Iran. Their fingerprints are all over this attack. They have consistently funded Hamas and other Palestinian groups to the tune of $100 million per year. This resolution condemns Hamas and Iran for its support of terrorist groups, such as Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, while also calling for all sanctions on Iran to be fully enforced. So I urge my colleagues to support this important resolution. It will send a clear message across the world that terrorists and their sponsors will be held to account for their atrocities, their crimes against humanity, their crimes of genocide. On December 7th, 1941, in response to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt said, it was a date which will live in infamy. So too will October the 7th, 2023. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I urge support and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from